Not the most radical thing you can do. That's my job. So I'm going to talk to you guys about how you can do it in a way that is very human-centered, which is the only way that I do it. And how, if you listen in the right way to culture, it will reveal things to you that are so easy to miss but are so profound. So quick introduction to me really quick. I'm the co-founder of two companies. Exposure Therapy is a community for strategists and creatives. We explore the edges of culture. A lot of our members are here, which is so exciting. I love that they're Stocksy people. And then I also have an agency where I work with brands that need to move the needle of culture. I mention this to say that a lot of my work deals with uncertainty. Uncertainty, especially in times like this, and how to navigate an uncertain future when things can be complex. And at a time right now where everything feels so chaotic, people's behaviors don't make sense. It feels like people are losing their minds a little bit. And you know, we have to ask ourselves, can you even predict the future at a time like this? Because it feels like, I mean, you even mentioned trends are so ephemeral. They come and go so quickly. So it's an important question to answer. And in order to do that, we need to start by taking a look at history first. Something has happened to our relationship with the past. So anytime we discuss the way the world has changed historically, we always talk about it in terms of culture, right? How culture changed and how culture evolved. And, you know, these things like the Oregon Trail or cowboy culture or, you know, beatniks or the nuclear family, these were not our lived experiences, but they are our emotional anchors. We all share them, and a lot of them were actually mythologies, by the way. Cowboys only were around for like a decade. Statistically speaking, the nuclear family was the majority for only about 15 years, and yet we continue to hold on to these myths. And like I said, there are emotional anchors. But it's really hard to imagine what the emotional anchors of the next 15 years or of the emotional anchors of the last 10 years will be in the future. Because stuff just keeps happening. Is it going to be NFTs? Will it be social distancing, millennial burnout? Honestly, I really doubt any of these things are going to make the top line of the history books. Because we just keep having black swan events. And you guys remember the whole, I mean, it's still going on, but the whole nostalgia core, liminal spaces thing, where literally if you're like an elder millennial like me, your memories are being pillaged by other generations that are kind of adopting them for themselves as if they're their own memories. Our memories feel fragmented. When you look back at this stuff, doesn't it feel like looking at somebody else's life sometimes? Because we have changed so much since then. There's a name for this, where it feels like you can't even access your own past. And it's called temporal disintegration. It's a real thing that happens when you have many acute experiences at one time, or in like a short period of time. Your brain actually warps its understanding of the time that you've experienced. And things start to fragment, and it can feel like you're remembering a stranger's memories. So we're losing our connection to the past. Or whatever it is, it's getting weird, right? Meanwhile, our connection to the future is getting weird too. This headline comes up every 3 months. People just keep spending like crazy, which doesn't make sense. Economists are confounded. There has never been a time in history where the economy is like this and so unpredictable, and yet people continue to spend. I do a lot of qualitative research where I talk to these generations, but you see it in these interviews too when you look at these articles. People will tell you they are spending like there's no tomorrow because they cannot see tomorrow. People literally cannot see like even 12 months into the future, let alone like the 5-year plan like we used to all have. This short-termism has really infected all parts of the market. There's a drop in C-suite tenure, stock buybacks are at an all-time high. There's a real pullback in US patent filings. All of these things are corporations in the market saying that they do not believe in the future. They're extracting value now instead of investing in what tomorrow may bring. If you're a creative in this room, you know this chart already. All of your marketing budgets are dropping, that knowing laugh. All right, so our connection to the past is fraying. We cannot connect to the future. And now we're stuck in this sense of like an eternal now. It's just now. All we do is react. And it feels like the future is like literally falling from the sky. If you're a futurist like me, though, you do have to interrogate this a little bit because someone always does figure out the future, and they make a lot of money doing it. And so we have to ask ourselves, is everything really that unpredictable? I'm sorry I don't have live videos for this. I decided to make this one simple. But do you guys remember all those girl summers we had? Barbie summer, hot girl summer, brat summer. We did not get one this year, and I don't know why. We didn't get a girl summer this year. But if you look at the messages in all these trends combined, over 3 years of periodizing our summers, they really were telling us, ladies, enjoy life and party because it makes it a lot easier in dealing with the difficulties of the real world. On the right is an inscription from an Egyptian tomb in the 25th century BCE that tells men, if you marry a party girl, do not deny her because it makes it easier in dealing with the difficulties of the real world. It's the same advice centuries apart. Have you guys seen these memes of high schoolers trying to tell time on a clock face? They're really cute, like just trying to hear them like try to rationalize how they're reading the time so wildly wrong. And in the comments, it's a lot of like the usual stuff. People saying like, oh my God, what are these kids going to do when they don't have like, their iPhones? On the right is an excerpt from a principal's publication in 1815, where principals are lamenting, oh my God, these kids depend so much on paper and pencil. What are they going to do when they don't have it and they have to use slate and chalk? Same thing, about 100 years apart, or 100-something years apart. How many of you know if you're on the right timeline right now? Does anybody know? You will, because your phones are listening, so it's going to start showing up in your algorithm now. There's this whole trend, and it's been studied by a lot of researchers too, that people are obsessed with figuring out if we're on the right timeline. Like, that's how they're coping with the unreality of the world. And so you'll get this in your feed now where it will tell you this just happened and this celebrity died or whatever, so that means we're on the right timeline, or it means we're on the wrong timeline. It's such a weird thing. You get it, but you don't get it. But it feels like a very modern preoccupation, right? It's like a strange modern thing. Except this text on the right is from the Gnostic movement, which was a pre-Christian cult that was obsessed with the idea of the fact that we were not on the right timeline. And in order to get on the right timeline, you'd have to transcend space and time in your mind. It was the same thing centuries apart. I can give you many side-by-sides like this. But all of them basically say, this was what is said in this quote. There are lots of quotes about how like history repeats itself and nothing ever really changes. But I love this quote because it has two meanings, by James Baldwin. People are trapped in history and history is trapped in them. So of course, history will repeat itself. But the other meaning that it's giving us is that if you want to know the future, just look inside people because it's already written there. And that's the kind of listening that we need to do if you want to be a futurist. So what all those examples tell us is that all of the signs of change, the tempestuous change on the surface of culture that looks like craziness, the hashtags, the trends, the virality, the stuff that looks erratic and doesn't make sense, that's on the surface, but the mechanisms of change, this deep ocean of like beliefs and behaviors that are underneath it all, that stuff changes very slowly. If ever, by the way, it changes so slowly that it announces itself decades and sometimes even centuries ahead of time. And another way of looking at this is that all of that craziness on the surface of culture, the hashtags, the trends, the virality, those are outgrowths of technology. But the beliefs and behaviors that control it all, that is psychotechnology. And psychotechnology is technology of the mind. So it's the ideas, concepts, and mental models that shape the world. If you pay attention to psychotechnologies, you will see the future coming long before anybody else does. And there are 3 psychotechnologies we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to show you how to do it. Big ideas, market conditioning, and units of culture. So this is a very dense presentation. I have a strict order that I only have 30 minutes. We're going to go through this very quickly, but if you want more of this, I've actually also published this as a report if you want to check it out later. So let's start with big ideas, our first psychotechnology. I said this earlier, but we never really got a chance to answer it, so let's think about it again. When we talk about the past, and we talk about how the past has changed, it's always in terms of culture. When we talk about the future, it's somehow just always a discussion about technology. If you look at any headline today about the future of anything, the future of religion, the future of the home, the future of sex and relationships, the future of food, the future of the human experience, it will always be mediated through either AI or robotics or algorithms. But it's worth noting what journalist Tom Vanderbilt says. When technology changes people, it's often not in the ways we might expect. When the washing machine first came into people's homes and went mainstream, it was widely expected at the time that this would liberate women from the home. Yeah, you already know what's going to come. That's what they thought. Women were going to enter the workforce en masse. What happened instead was most of the families at the time all had housekeepers. They fired their housekeepers, and the wife or the mother ended up doing more laundry than ever before. She spent more time in the home than she did before the washing machine. And that's because even though the technology had changed, the psychotechnology of a woman's role in the home had not changed. The futurists of the 1950s predicted online shopping, but they never predicted female financial independence. They predicted email, but they definitely never predicted stay-at-home dads. They predicted all kinds of really wondrous kitchen technology, but they never guessed that more and more people would be eating alone. And that's because we think we have ideas, but our ideas have us. Carl Jung said it best. He said, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. We are possessed by the ideas of our time. They are what controls us. And because of that, our ideas also control our technologies. That's what all those examples just showed us. And I'm going to give you a great example of this. This was a study that was published in Harvard Business Review recently. In 2024, the top 10 use cases for AI as self-reported. So this is a qualitative and quantitative study, but there are a lot of signals that also prove this. They were primarily AI is an extension of the mind. So editing, search, education, stuff like that. The top 3 use cases by 2025 were therapy and companionship, organizing my life, and finding purpose. This was built as an extension of the mind, but we use it as an extension of our hearts. Because technology is also subject to the big ideas of our time. We will always bend the technology to serve our needs and not the other way around. So if you want to know the future of any kind of technology, be looking at people, not the technology itself. Now, when it comes to predicting the future, and when it comes to this first psychotechnology, which is big ideas, how do you actually do it? Well, one way is this equation. A big idea is a trend plus counter trend. The reason why a lot of people get stuck is because you can easily look at a trend and be like, that's it, that's a trend, but trends hardly last anymore, and people are giving up on trends altogether. But when you add a trend plus its counter trend, it will tell you what the big idea is behind it, and that is a much deeper psychotechnology. So I'm going to give you an example. How many of you know this crazy lady? You guys know her? You don't know her? She's nuts. Contessa, you know her. She is the queen of the carnivore diet. I used to have the Liver King here, but he's had the whole drama of steroids and all that stuff. Anyways, so she is an example of the carnivore diet. The carnivore diet is very much about white knuckles control and a very narrow identity, and it is all about very much a fixed mindset about how you should live in the world. You could argue a very valid counter trend to this is psychedelics, which is rising more and more in the zeitgeist, right? Psychedelics is the opposite of that. It's the fluidity of identity. It's the letting go of control. If you force yourself to add these things together and ask yourself what they ladder up to, they ladder up to higher states of being. This is a bit of an older insight. So you're going to see a lot of this in culture right now, but this is something that my team and many other people were talking about at least 1 or 2 years ago. This idea of transcending, becoming a better, more exalted version of yourself. That's what these 2 things are pointing towards. Now, you know you have a big idea when it goes outside of its category. because big ideas do not stay in their lanes. They go super wide across culture. And now we are seeing this idea of higher states of being in finance, of all places. Does anybody follow Subway Takes? Yes. Do you know this one? Where this guy is like, money's not real, it's all, I manifest it. We all have a little bit of that in us right now. Yeah. Okay. Like, really, for him, being broke is a mindset. I interviewed this woman on the right, Celia Roberts Hughes, for exposure therapy. She's a financial therapist, which is a whole new industry to deal with the craziness of money. She says she can't even really consult clients that get too spiritual about money anymore because they don't even want to believe that it's real. That is how spirituality and higher states of being is going across culture in weird ways. I love this chart. This is a fantastic chart. I use this chart to prove a lot of things, if I'm being honest, but I think it really applies here. Every year, the Fed asks people two questions. How do you feel about your personal financial well-being? And how do you feel about the country's financial well-being? It decoupled sometime in 2019, and it has never come back. And I guarantee you, in 2025, these numbers will start diverging again. There's a near 50-point difference between these. And to me, that says the same thing as the guy on the Subway Takes interview. The world might be burning down, but I control my reality, right? It doesn't affect me, this idea of higher states of being. And it's how you end up with brands like this. This is a brand called Communion. It is a very spiritually, religiously coded finance app. We also see this idea of higher states of being going into medicine. These are Mind Bloom ads. Does anybody know Mind Bloom? Yeah. Do you use I use Mind Bloom. I love Mind Bloom. Mind Bloom is at-home ketamine therapy. They do so much research. They have a mountain of science. They have incredible doctors on their board. They go and, I think, petition the FDA. Like, they are very scientifically minded, but they do not even sell the science. They lead with ads like this. These look like sermons, right? It's something else. I was at one of the country's largest malls not too long ago, and the busiest store was not, I was in the athletic wing. It wasn't Nike, it wasn't Lululemon, it wasn't like the pretzel shop. It was this little store for healing crystals and healing tarot. A literal perfect incarnation of spirituality and medicine coming together. You guys remember that trend about show me two videos that give off the same energy? Well, these are two charts that give off the same energy. So on the left is a study from HBR where they tracked language in C-level job postings over time. And that line that's taking a nosedive is job postings that mention proficiency in managing financial and material resources. That number that is skyrocketing is job descriptions that mention strength and social skills. And if you read the article, also like soft skills and interpersonal skills, things like that. On the right is a chart that shows language over time, and rationality words are dropping while intuition words are rising. These look like near inverse relationships to me. I'm not saying they are, but they look pretty perfectly inverse to each other. And I think there's an argument to be made that we are literally trading in reason for feeling in our culture. If you had just been paying attention to all the technologies and whatever is in the headlines, you would have missed this big idea. And now it's so evident in our culture. I mean, we all do astrology now, and people are like quasi-religious, and it's such a prominent part of our culture, but the seeds for this were planted so long ago. Culture was revealing itself, and if you had been listening in the right places, you would have seen it, and you would have seen that it wasn't so unpredictable to begin with. Because now all of a sudden people are like, why is everybody so religious all of a sudden? But it's not a surprise. There were many reasons for this. Another way to find big ideas is to look at things that are weird. So I recently found out that weird in Middle English used to mean someone who could control fate. So there's obviously a long history of us understanding that weird things are somehow connected to the future. They're telling us something about the future. This was weird when it first happened. This is Muscle Beach. Can anybody guess why it was weird? Because it wasn't girls in bikinis, and it wasn't that they were on the beach. This got a bunch of backlash because it was men flaunting their bodies. And at that time, and that is Arnold Schwarzenegger, by the way, at that time, men did not do that. Vanity was a woman's domain. It was not a man's domain. And people thought that was weird. And now it's basically all of TikTok. Now we don't see it as weird or vanity. We see it as like self-respect and taking care of yourself and taking pride in like the physical form. And I bring up this example to make a really important point about weird. There's a lot of weird out there for shock value. The algorithm rewards that, but ignore that. That's not the weird I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of weird that is the trespass of invisible boundaries and norms. Muscle Beach was a trespass of boundaries and norms. This is the kind of weird you feel in your body before you kind of understand why it's weird. So what's weird today? This is weird. We've seen a huge rise in communes, but mommunes is what pisses people off. And it is single mothers living together to raise children. This angers people. And they say it's because they don't like the idea of communal living. You should, a child needs a home with two parents, all that stuff. That's what they say. But I can tell you that's not what's bothering people. The invisible norm that is being violated here is that these women are decentering marriage. That is the problem people have with this. And this is telling us something about the future. It's telling us about what community means, what family and parenting means. This is also super weird. There was a time where if you were a billionaire, like the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds or the Gettys, you would build these massive monuments in the middle of the city in your name, honoring human ingenuity and all this stuff, but it was really just like a big building with your name on it. I don't really see that anymore. I don't know if Zuckerberg has a building like that, right? Instead, they are building private bunkers on private islands. And the weirdness of this is, Silicon Valley, they're preparing for some sort of apocalypse, yes. And, they're going to be weird characters. But it's weird because it tells us it's violating something about what status means. If status is not flaunting it, and it's whatever this is, it's telling us that our new status symbol isn't about, being able to be a pillar of society, but having the option of leaving society. That's what this is telling us. Weird tells us where old values are crashing into new values, and that is a very rich terrain for anybody that wants to either understand or build the future. I'm a brand strategist, so I always look at this in terms of brands. But if you're building anything in the future, this is something you should pay attention to. So that's our first psychotechnology. Our second one is market conditioning. So market conditioning is basically training people to have certain expectations and desires in a market. And politicians can do that, influencers can do that, communities can do that. The honest truth is that brands are usually the ones that do that. Equinox conditioned us to see the gym as like a temple for high-performance living. You already know Apple conditioned us to see electronics as like identity markers or markers of taste. It's easy to not remember the before times, but before social media really made us kind of always watching each other, it was things like Architectural Digest's Open Door series that conditioned us to think it was okay to be voyeuristic in other people's homes. We didn't really have that before this series started. And the point I want to make here is that your audience, whatever audience, if you're a leader, your audience, if you're an influencer, or if you're a brand, is being conditioned every moment of every day. But the thing is, you hope you're the one conditioning them, or you hope it's your industry that's conditioning them. But increasingly, the conditioning is happening outside of your industry and outside of your domain. And that's what you need to be paying attention to if you're going to start looking at the future. So I would make the argument, as an example, that something like the fragrance industry and the fragrance consumer is actually not being conditioned by the fragrance companies at all. This consumer is being influenced by the publishing industry. I'm going to give you an example. And by the way, this is based on incredible research by a researcher named Lily McGonigal, a good friend of mine in the UK. And this is a lot of her insight here. Does anybody here have the shadow work journal? You have it? You're the first, do you?
Yes, but I don't open it.
Okay, that's fine. I also didn't open mine. You're the first person I have ever given this talk to that has this journal. Let me tell you about this journal. It sold 1 million copies last year. 1 million copies, okay? The best-selling self-help book, that was actually published by a publisher, was Peter Attia's Outlive, and he's a huge influencer. He also only sold 1 million copies. 1 million copies is a big deal. This was sold just on TikTok Shop through affiliates, and it sold 1 million copies with no publisher. It wasn't published internationally. She didn't have a PR team, nothing. It took off. That's another story I could get into. But the Shadow Work Journal is basically based on, I think, Carl Jung's teachings. When we didn't open it, we should open it at some point. Carl Jung's teachings about embracing your dark side. And women love this shit. They are absolutely eating it up. And it's a lot of stuff, like when you hear about shadow self, you're going to start hearing it more and more in culture. It started with this book. Meanwhile, this happened. Can somebody tell us what romantasy is? If you laughed, you can tell us. That's exactly, yes. That's right. It is fantasy smut. They know. I know a lot of these people know. Okay, so this is fantasy smut. Yes, with dragons and orcs and all this. There you go. Women also love this stuff too. This is a massive bright spot in the publishing industry right now because publishing is taking a nosedive, but this is growing like crazy. And if you read romantasy, you know it's a lifestyle. It's not like a book you just read. It unlocks something in you as a woman. And what's interesting is, yes, there is sex, and yes, there's a lot of love and power and all of that stuff, but also there's a lot of vengeance in these books. So the heroines in these books, by the end of them, literally become killing machines. They kill anybody who's wronged them. They, level entire scores of people. It's a very heady mix of sex and power and death and all this stuff. And then you end up on the fragrance subreddit with posts like this, where this woman is asking for fragrance to strike fear in a man's heart. She says, I want to smell like a villain. I want to smell so evil and poisonous and provocative and lustful and powerful and murderous that I actually took this out for another presentation, but I probably could have left it in for you guys. And she says, just absolutely undeniable. This is a really weird way of describing being attractive, right? I can tell you this is 100% informed by the romantasy genre and the Shadow Work Journal. And now there is a whole thriving subcategory of fragrance with names like Juliet Has a Gun. And if you know romantasy, this title, Laughing with a Mouthful of Blood, is 100% romantasy coded, right? And I'm going to tell you some of those the fragrance notes for these. So they describe things like fear and sweat and blood and pain and vomit. Those are the descriptors for these fragrances, and women are buying them up because these books have conditioned them to have a very different idea of what feeling irresistible should smell like and should feel like. It's an experience. So I don't know if you guys follow the fragrance industry, but it's gone so interesting and it's gone so sideways. And there's a lot of reasons for why fragrance has taken off for post-COVID, and I won't get into it, but they want to experience these stories through their fragrances. So if you want to use market conditioning as a tool for understanding the future, look for the private experiences that are conditioning people's broader expectations in life. Because it's happening, just like that James Baldwin quote, right? History is trapped in people. They are being conditioned somewhere, but you have to look in the places that maybe are not obvious to you, and it will tell you where people are headed. Okay, so our last psychotechnology is units of culture. And for this one, I'm just going to start with a really short story about, not even a short story, but I'm going to talk to you about, in this country, in the US, we have a very rich history of people appreciating nature. So we all read Thoreau and Emerson, right, in high school, and John Muir and all those people. And you're going to recognize this next photo because it was brought up earlier in our presentation. We never really did anything about taking care of this earth until this photo came, which you guys already saw, the Earthrise photo, the selfie. And it's because for the first time, we suddenly had a new measurement for understanding our relationship to the earth. Literally a new unit of measure for understanding what we owed the earth. And this photo was the beginning of every conservationist, recycling, lobbyist thing that you have seen in your lifetimes. It started with this photo. And it updated our measurement of culture, or one of our most important measurements in culture. What's interesting is there are a lot of parts of culture that we are still not measuring right, where we have really outdated, stubborn rulers. We talk about travel in units of leisure, but people aren't traveling for leisure, they're traveling for healing. You already know this. We talk about wellness in units of health. But if you were a disciple of Gwyneth Paltrow's like I was, or if you were, if you pay attention to Aubrey Marcus or some of the more outer edge ones like Mia Magic, you know wellness is really about people seeking an experience of rebirth. This whole protracted debate about working from home, it comes from the fact that our language has a measurement baked into it. We cannot talk about money without using the measurement of time, and we can't talk about time without using the measurement of money. This is from a great book called Metaphors We Live by George Lakoff, where he talks about all the different metaphors, like how love is always described like a container, time is always described as money. So of course, if we cannot separate time and money, we cannot separate people from being in seats. And that is a measurement that we're married to. And speaking of marriage, we still talk about marriage in units of love. But there is a lot of research that shows it stopped being primarily about love a long time ago. You find somebody, you want to love them, but really you're looking for self-actualization in a relationship. You're asking yourself, if you're being honest, what you're asking yourself is, can I realize my full potential as a person in this relationship? And just to give you an idea of how stubborn this measurement is, that headline is actually 10 years old. There have never been so many outdated rulers in our culture at one time. We are so ready for new measurements. I only gave you a few. There are many more measurements that need to be updated. Someone's going to do it. If you're a brand, it's a great opportunity. But if you just want to figure out where the future is headed, find where the holes are, because that is where we're going to see the most cultural innovation. And Disney, by the way, did exactly this. Childhood before Disney was all about innocence. Okay, we had people like Freud and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. It was all about the tabula rasa, this idea of the clear mind, or the blank slate. But Disney, with his early cartoons, shifted the measurement of a good childhood from innocence to imagination. And that, first of all, wild success, obviously. If you can create a new measurement, you will capture a ton of value. But also, it has informed the schools we send our kids to, the toys we buy them, the books we let them read. It really changed our culture. Airbnb also did this. Before Airbnb, lodging was always about amenities. They knew they couldn't compete in that, so they created a new unit, which was, lodging was about belonging. It was about living like a local, and that completely turned the hospitality industry on its head. So, I'm rushing through this because I got the 5-minute sign 4 minutes ago. Look for the places where we're using old rulers to measure new things. They will always give you a clue about where we're headed, or where we are primed, where there's a very strong latent demand for a new measurement that will absolutely come through. Okay. Trace says I don't need to rush, so chill out, everybody. All right. So, can you predict the future? I think you can, but you have to be able to listen in the right way. And I've offered you 3 ways here: the big ideas, the marketing conditioning, the units of culture. It's a practice. It's not easy. I miss things all the time, but you need to always be taking in signals and asking yourself about the people, not so much the technologies, not so much the structures around them. What are people's secret desires? People are already living in the future. You just don't see it. They live it in their private experiences. They live it in their heads. They live it in their hearts. They live it in their intimate relationships. That's where you need to look. And so, as a parting thought, I want to give you this quote by novelist Jose Saramago, who says, "Chaos is merely order waiting to be deciphered." And I know the world looks so crazy. It is crazy. I study culture. It's exhausting and depressing, and it's hard. But I know for a fact that what we are seeing now is actually not chaos. It really is a world reorganizing itself. It is a world figuring out how to find meaning now that a lot of old systems are falling apart. So I would encourage you to be optimistic, because when you're pessimistic, you will miss the signals. But people are trying their best. And if you go into it with that perspective, you'll let them reveal their true motivations to you, and you'll see where the future is headed. And that's my talk. Thank you guys so much.